Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and the Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. It's a lovely sunny day in Glasgow as we record today on the 14th of August, I think.
Close enough.
Yes, it is. Gosh, there you go, listeners. Just a little timestamp for you there. We're kind of stretching it a wee bit, aren't we, today a little?
Slightly, but it does make sense.
Yeah, this comic in question today, listeners. Peter bought a copy. Did you buy it at the Mart last year after I mentioned it, or did you buy it and then we thought about doing it?
I can't remember.
I think I'd read something about it or read, the cover had sort of caught me, and then you got a copy at the Mart. Listeners, we're reading the main lead story from issue 447 of Action Comics, published on the 27th of February 1975, not long before my second birthday, and literally 2 days after the 32nd birthday of George Harrison off of the Beatles. George doesn't get too many birthday shout-outs in this podcast. It's really just Paul. So there you go. Just to give you some context, everyone's favourite Travelling Wilbury, the band the Beatles could have been. Yes, Peter's going to tell us about the cover to Action 447, and you can see if you can start to work out why we've decided to cover it.
At the top, the line of DC Superstars, Action Comics. In this issue, Action Plus with the Atom. We're not doing the Atom story.
Boo.
25 cents, number 447. May, approved by the Comics Code. And that's all the top. But the main image on the cover, there's a waterfall. There's a man in a canoe who's falling out of his canoe because he's coming down the waterfall. And he's panicking. He's saying, I've got to invent someone to save me. Someone super strong who can fly. Like him. And materializing at the front of the cover is Superman, who says,
Great Krypton, what am I doing here?
And the banner at the bottom gives us the title of the story, which is The Man Who Created Superman.
Yes, it's a very interesting one, listeners. We think so. It's worth doing. And it mixes things up, and it's a shorter story and all that sort of stuff. And we begin the story, close-up shot of a guy with long grown-in white hair and thick white eyebrows and thick white beard and moustache, and he's sat on a rock surrounded by animals. We can see some monkeys and chimpanzees, and it looks like a rhino and a sort of leopard cheetah type guy and a wild boar, and he's sat on a rock by the beach. We can see palm trees and stuff in the background, and he's monologuing away to us, and well, the rest of his audience, the animals, as he says.
All right, kids, gather round your Uncle Joey here and listen to a new story about the mighty hero from the sky who guards the whole world from danger. The same hero who someday is going to plop himself down right here and take Uncle Joey back home. I call him Superman. And I can make Superman do anything I want, like go after a car that's slipping off a mountain road. I can do it because I'm the man who created Superman.
And as he's saying this little bit about Superman going after a car that's slipping off a mountain, there's a large image of Superman flying down towards a car that's about to go off the edge of a mountain road. Yes, indeed. What is going on? Well, maybe the caption credits box will give you a clue.
Edited by Julius Schwartz, written by Elliot S. Magan, art by Kurt Swan and Bob Oxner.
Fantastic. The first panel of page 2, it's almost like the camera's pulled back and we can get the sense that Joey is basically living in a remote, lost, not quite a desert island because there's lots of thick foliage, a jungle island, you might say. And he's imagining a large image of Superman, but is it Superman? He's certainly got the familiar red and blue outfit on, red trunks and a red cape, blue bodysuit, but he's much beefier. He looks a bit thicker around the chest and traps and the neck and all this, and there's no S on his chest. We hear the voice of Joey as he continues to talk to us and to the animals.
This Superman, you know, is a tall kind of fella from another world altogether. Wears a colourful costume. Does all sort of superhuman stuff. Well, now one day, Superman saw this car going off the mountain road, and
there's a quick dissolve, and a caption reads,
At that moment, on the outskirts of the city of Metropolis,
and we see Superman flying down at great speed because a car has gone off a mountain road. As he flies down, Supes is thinking, this sharp mountainside curve is incredibly dangerous. So it was just a matter of time before the guardrail gave out to some speeding car. You see Supes flying up from below to catch this green motor which has come off the road. And as he starts to fly up, bearing the car to set it right again, he thinks, Great Krypton! Here comes another speeder, and now there's no guardrail there at all.
Moments before the second car careens off the cliffside, the son of Krypton lets go of the first car, and in mid-air, he rips off the door next to the driver's seat.
Yes, basically, for the rest of the page, there's a lot of say what you see captioning, which I'm just going to let Peter read.
Next thing the falling driver knows, he's being lifted and hurled into the sky as Superman snatches the indestructible cape from his back and races the second car to the deadly curve.
Yes, and as the driver of the first car hurtles up into the sky and his car falls further into the chasm, Supes is tying his cape between the posts of the broken guardrail to serve as, a substitute.
In the next millisecond, it isn't a pair of steel arms, but a red cape that catches the second car, as the first driver's fall is interrupted and his machine is sacrificed to the mountainside.
Yes, as the second car was flying into Superman's cape, Supes flies back up, catches the first driver, flies back down towards the surface of the road, and we see the green car exploding further down into the chasm. How careless are the drivers in the metropolis area that they're anticipating just crashing into this barrier? I mean, do they crash into it on a daily basis? Is it every car that passes just hits this?
It must be something very, very urgent that they're both speeding to.
I bet they're all using their phones and not paying attention. Like all the idiots I see when I'm out walking the streets of Glasgow on a daily basis. Anyway, rant over.
Now watch what happens next and decide whether it is chance, fate, or something else that brings these three people together on this mountainside.
Yes, as they fly back down, you can see the car burning further down in the mountain chasm, and Superman's passenger is saying,
Superman, my papers are in that car. I must have them back.
Calm down, fella. They're a charred mess. It was a choice between you and the car, and you won. As they land on the roadside, the other vehicle, which is still being held in position by Superman's cape, the driver of that car has got out, and we can see that he's a slightly younger looking man, kind of auburn hair, in a pale green suit. The chap who Superman rescued, I should have said, has got red hair and a moustache, wearing a smart grey suit. I quite like his tie, actually. The new arrival, the guy in the green suit, getting out of the car, says, Superman, thank you for saving me. My name is Werner Springer. I'm usually a better driver, but I was hurrying to
a meeting of the Defensive Arms Commission in the city, right?
Why, yes. How did you know?
My name is Brad Jerome, and I'm going to the same place, because I want to stop people like you, Mr. Springer, from exploding your bombs where they could destroy life.
Supes, listening to this, says, Is this a private conversation, or can I be let in on it?
This man is a brilliant scientist, Superman. So caught up with research he doesn't know right from wrong.
And the guy in the green suit, Mr. Springer, mimes a yawn. And he says, Ho-hum. But Brad continues.
Mr. Springer is pushing to test a new weapon of his design before it's been proven in the laboratory. A solar energy bomb to be tested on a South Pacific island. It could burn all life for miles to a cinder.
Yes, and we see a shot of presumably this South Pacific island. We can see some skeletons of animal life on the beach that have obviously been devastated by the solar energy bomb. Final panel of page 4. Mr. Springer gets back into his car, drives off saying, Enough of this alarmist talk. I have a meeting to attend. To which Brad Jerome says,
Didn't even offer me a ride.
You'll beat him there, because I'm flying you, says Superman, and they take off. We quickly cut to the studios of WGBS News, and we see Clark Kent, anchorman, giving an evening report as he says, Solar energy expert Werner Springer met with reporters today after a meeting of the Defensive Arms Commission. He said that the Pacific test of his new solar bomb will take place tomorrow as scheduled. This is a victory for Springer over opposition, which claimed the bomb was too dangerous to test in the atmosphere. We can see the floor manager speaking to Clark through his headpiece. The floor manager saying,
Another 30 seconds. Signal Clark to wrap it up.
We see that Clark has been joined on his right side by the luxuriantly dressed Steve Lombard, as Clark wraps up his report saying, For Steve Lombard, Oscar Asherman and WGBS News, this is Clark Kent saying, Be happy today. And again we hear the floor manager as he says,
All right, close down the set and run the credits.
Clark and Steve have got up from behind their desks in the next panel. He's been joined by another colleague, a man with a dark hair and a brown suit, and there's a young red-haired girl bearing some drinks on a tray. The floor manager, he's saying to the lads,
Good job, fellas. I like that soccer story, Steve.
And the new arrival, the girl bearing the tray, says,
Show's over. Here are your refreshments, gentlemen.
Oh, would you hand me my warm milk, Lanny? Says Clark.
Don't give me all the credit. Clarky here is the glue that holds the show together.
Says Steve Lombard. Has he been on the show before?
No, I don't think so.
I'm not sure if he has. Steve Lombard, ladies and gentlemen. Look forward to a Steve Lombard cover gallery on the socials this week. Maybe. Who can say? And as he says these very positive reinforcing words, Steve pats Clark on the back. Clark goes, oh, like an absolute dafty. He then spills his milk all over Lanny, who says...
Ew!
Lanny starts to brush the milk off her dress as Lombard puts his arm round her shoulder and says...
Kent's not really such a clumsy oaf, Lanny. It just seems that way. Let good old Stevie help with that wet outfit.
Well, that's a bit creepy. Clark interrupts this saying, let me help.
No, that's all right, Steve. Mr. Kent, I'm a big girl. I can take care of myself.
Well, no, Lanny. I insist. Let me... Oh, gosh, look out! As Clark reaches to take Lanny's arm, he tips the entire tray that Lanny was carrying, which spills over Steve Lombard. Lanny says...
Oh, Steve, excuse me.
And a horrified Steve exclaims...
My $300 suit! Coffee stained!
Gosh. We leave this horrible scene as Clark exits the room saying, better get back to my office. And we see the dark-haired chap talking to the floor manager and saying...
It's almost worth losing your drinks to see Clark show up that dumb jock Lombard.
After that little bit of office hijinks, there's a caption for panel 3.
But the fun's over when Clark reaches his office to find...
Yes, there's a familiar figure, red-haired chap with a moustache standing outside, who Clark recognises and thinks, that Jerome fellow from the car accident. What does he want with Clark Kent?
Mr. Kent, I'm Brett Jerome, and I'm with a company concerned with ecology. I'd like to talk to you about that solar bomb and the possibility of your contacting Superman to stop it.
Well, I'll see what I can do.
Forgive me for talking so fast, but ecology isn't the only reason I want to stop the bomb. I had a car accident this morning in which I lost experimental findings showing that there may be a habitable island in the underexplored region of the ocean where the bomb is to be tested.
And at this point, infuriatingly, we cut to an exterior shot of the WGBS skyscraper. Why do they do this?
To annoy you.
I think they have. They probably sat down 50 years ago and gone, right, the wee boy just been born in Paisley. A couple of years he's going to start getting into this sort of stuff. A few more decades, he's really going to peak. So what can we do to annoy him when he gets there? Anyway, Brad narrates the next couple of panels.
An island holding not only thousands of animals, but possibly my lost uncle, Joseph J. Jerome, who took off in an inflatable raft from a cruise ship in the area 25 years ago.
Yes, and there's a nice rippled flashback panel where we see a big cruise ship steaming through the sea and a crudely rendered image of someone jumping overboard to land in a yellow inflatable dinghy. Fantastic. Brad Jerome's narration continues.
The authorities figured he was dead, but he'd always had a kind of second sight, knew about things no one else knew. I've always believed that he somehow knew he'd find a sort of life out there that was happier than the one he led.
Yes, and another rippled flashback panel shows Joseph J. Jerome pulling his dinghy up on the beach of what looks like a very comfortable island. Indeed, we can see that he has long grown-in ginger hair. It must be a family trait. At the top of page 7, we shift location, and the caption reads...
At almost that very moment, on a tiny island paradise in the South Pacific...
Yes, we see Joseph J. Jerome, Uncle Joey, sat with his animal audience, a monkey on his back.
Literally.
Yep. Is that not Somebody in Spiral Carpets? I can't remember. Who played in Alloa on Saturday night? Anyway, Uncle Joey saying to the assembled animal horde...
So this newsman fella, he right away told his hero friend Superman the story. And Superman, he'd never been too keen on having this bomb anyway. So even though he thought it was crazy, he up and flew off. He could fly, you know, to the other side of the world, where it was still daylight and they were getting this bomb readied up for the big boom.
And there's a nice rippled image as Joey imagines Superman flying towards a large military vessel. The Superman that Joey imagines is, again, thicker set, no S symbol on his chest.
And guess who plopped out of the sky onto the deck of a certain Navy cruise ship as the old man spoke those words?
Yes, as Superman alights on the deck of the ship, the captain says to him,
Superman, what are you doing out here?
Asking you to delay the test of the solar bomb, Captain. I have reason to believe it may cause a great catastrophe.
I'm afraid that's impossible, Superman, even for you. It was hooked up to an automatic timer as soon as the word to go ahead came from Metropolis. We left it out at sea. And now we're heading for an observation point at a safe distance. Want to see with the binocs?
I can see better without them, thanks, says Supes, and we can see the bomb floating at some distance away from the Navy ship. It looks like marker buoys or something round it, but we can basically see the top of the rocket poking out of the water. Supes continues. I've got some heavy news for you, Captain. That timer your men hooked up is running a bit fast. I hope this bathtub you sail can get out of here within a half hour, because that's when that baby's going to blow. You see Supes using his supervision to assess what's going on with the equipment. In the first panel of page 8, he flies off from the ship as we hear the captain giving an instruction.
Navigator, open the ship up to full throttle. And send up an orderly with my tranquilizers, please.
Lol.
Meanwhile, on that uncharted island,
Uncle Joey standing on top of a rock waving his arms at a bunch of monkeys as he's saying,
he could lift the ship and fly where it was safe. He just wanted to get a rise out of the captain. But when he zoomed out across the water to where the bomb was, he found a new problem. And as Uncle Joey tells his animal friends about his made-up character's new problem...
Yes, we see Soups standing on top of one of the floating things surrounding the head of the bomb. He's scanning it with his vision and he's thinking, great stars, I'm going to have to do more than lift that warship out of the way when this monster goes up. If I move it, it'll explode. If I don't stop it, the results will be worse than the ecologists feared. Back with Uncle Joey, who's another little rippled panel showing a devastated city, as he's saying to the monkeys,
Old Superman discovered that when the bomb went, it would send out a heat wave around the world that would suck up all the oxygen in the air and no living thing would survive.
Yes, obviously what we see in that little rippled panel is the effects. The animals look a bit concerned, and they actually, in this panel, seem to be looking beyond Uncle Joey behind them as he continues.
Now, our hero was at a loss. The world he'd spent a lifetime defending was about to kill itself, and he didn't know how to stop it. So he just flew around thinking, until he found an island. The same one the young fella had told his reporter friend about. And on the island...
Joey's interrupted as a voice behind him says, Joseph J. Jerome, I presume. And under a beautiful sunset sky, Joey whirls around and sees Soups and he says...
Eh? Oh my gosh!
The first panel of page 9, the monkeys all run away in fright as Joey jumps to his feet and exclaims,
Superman! But you're a figment of my imagination. You don't really exist, and neither does the solar bomb.
The solar bomb? How do you know about that?
The old castaway then tells the Man of Steel the story of his past few days as it happened, word for amazing word, and...
Great little panel here, which I think we'll try and fit onto the socials because I like the layout of the dialogue captions, and it's a great conversation. As Soups is saying, what else did you make up about me?
You've an enemy, a bald evil scientist.
Yes, Lex Luthor.
And another one, a desperado from the Old West.
Terra Man.
And you met another planet's hero not long ago.
Vartox. Incredible. Jerome, I don't know how you do this, but I want you to do something for me.
Anything, what is it?
End your story. Figure out how I defuse the bomb, tell the ending in a strong, clear voice, and I'll listen. And with that, Soups flies up into the air. Jerome, looking after him, says,
Sure enough. Except, I ain't figured how it ends yet.
The final panel of page 9 is a nice little headshot of Jerome as he imagines Soups standing beside the rocket again, and Jerome is saying,
I suppose you start by rocketing back to the bomb, and you stand around looking confused for a minute or so. Then the swarm of Navy jets sent by that panicky captain screams overhead, trying to doom million to one shot the chance that they can blast a solar bomb without it going off.
And that's what we see. We see Clark looking up as the Navy jets fly overhead, dropping their own little armaments.
And that's stupid, so it tees you off. You hop up toward the Navy bombs, and you realise that it's less than 5 minutes till the big bomb's gonna blow.
Yeah, we see Soups flying up towards the descending artillery.
You spin around those little pea-bombs like a dervish to get them out of the way, until they all fly out to blow where they can't do harm. But they give you an idea.
Yeah, a very flash-like panel here as we see Soups spinning at great speed, and as Joey describes, we see the pea-bombs flying out and away from their intended target. In panel 4, we see them all exploding further away as Soups thinks, yes, if I can separate the big boom into a bunch of little booms, maybe it won't cause that deadly wall of intense heat to sweep over the earth like a shroud. Joey's narration picks up again.
Now you know how you'll handle the problem, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, because Earth won't survive the blast, and maybe you won't either.
Yes, final panel, page 10, we see Superman spinning and turning and cartwheeling all around the massive bomb, disturbing the surface of the ocean. And as he's careering around, Soups is thinking, the blast will go off in seconds. Hope I can build to the right speed by then. Joey's narration continues at the top of page 11.
You spin like 3 billion lives depend on it. They do. And just as the demon weapon clicks the signal it's about to blow, you crack through the time barrier. A minute into the future, and you take the demon with you.
Soups spins faster and faster as the bomb raises up out the sea, and it looks as though it's growing transparent and fading out.
Next thing those watching from the ship know is that you and the bomb vanish for a moment. Then, as you reappear, the nightmare bomb begins to explode, and you disappear and appear again.
Yeah, this is tremendous. It's giving me Captain Atom in the 80s vibes. We see
Yes.
a massive explosion, and then another almost massive explosion, and then Soups appears in the heart of the explosion as it goes off again.
You're courageously pulling the deadly weapon with you through the time barrier as it explodes. so the explosion itself seems like a long series of smaller blasts which are less dangerous. It's an amazing feat, saving the Earth from the full fury of the monster bomb, only to absorb the whole shock yourself, along with rigours of travel across buffeting time.
Yeah, this whole page is going on the socials, listeners, because quite frankly, it's astonishing. We are continued on the 4th page following, but the final image of page 11 is Supes being hurled backwards from a massive fiery red and yellow explosion. We pass, double spread advertisement for the most spectacular stories ever told, the tabloid DC Bible publication, which I have sitting over there. And there's also an advertisement with the tabloid reprint of All-Star Comics issue 3, the first appearance of the JSA, which is justification actually enough for doing this comic because it features an image of some Golden Age superheroes, and it's interesting to consider that it's being reprinted at this point in time. What could be looming on the horizon? I hear you cry. Interesting. We pass another advertisement for even more tabloids and tabloid reprints, and we arrive at the top of page 12 to see Superman turning and twisting through the sky as he falls towards the Navy ship we saw earlier. From the ship, we hear a voice say, "Flying object at 11 o'clock.
That's no object. That's Superman.
Supes drops into the water. Panel 2 in at the ocean, as another voice on the ship says, "Throw that man a life preserver. He just saved all our lives."
Throw me one. His splash nearly knocked me overboard.
I hate when that happens. In panel 3, we see Superman being winched in a line up onto the deck of the ship. Winched, of course, means something different in Glasgow, but there you go. As Joey's narration continues.
He'll be alright, of course. He's Superman. But just one more thing. Before Superman flies home, he's going to stop off and take Joey Jerome, the old storyteller, along with him. Because I've spent enough years alone, and I want to see if the rest of the world is the way I imagined it.
And we cut to busy, bustling Metropolis. Actually, it's not. The pavement's dead. One person get into a car, but a couple other people. But anyway, you know what I mean. And we see an overhead shot of Joey Jerome and Clark Kent walking along outside the WGBS television studios. Mr. Jerome is saying,
"Wow, the world is almost exactly as I imagined it, Mr. Kent. It's uncanny."
"Not uncanny, Mr. Jerome. A psychologist friend of mine gave me a possible explanation for your remarkable imagination. It may be that your unconscious mind is closely tuned in with the progress of events, so that you have the ability to figure out what will happen next on Earth from what's happened already. Take the fact that you knew about Superman, even though you were lost before he made himself known. There were reports of a super baby 25 years ago, just like reports of flying saucers today. You just realized the baby would one day grow to be a man and go public."
Well, I guess that's possible. Anyway, thanks for interviewing me, Mr. Kent, but I've got to go now. First day of work, you know.
A slow dissolve takes us to the top of page 13 and a caption reads,
"And soon in another part of the city."
Supes is seen signing an autograph for a little dark-haired kid as he's saying to Jerome, "I had a feeling you might like this kind of work, Jerome." And Jerome, who's dressed in a big white shirt and has a purple cape tied around his neck, replies,
"Thanks for arranging my new job, Superman. And thanks for coming to sign autographs on my first day."
"I'll be leaving now. You're the feature attraction here,"
"See ya,"
says Joey, and we see him sat on a kind of rocky throne with squirrels and crows balanced behind him as a whole bunch of little kids sit down as he begins,
"Gather round, friends. Your Uncle Joey's going to tell you a story about an ancient Viking village hidden from human sight in the woods of northern Maine."
And Supes walks off. He's thinking to himself, even a Superman can learn something from the old storyteller. He flies from the zoo. You can see a sign proclaiming that the zoo is now featuring Uncle Joey Jerome, the world's greatest storyteller. And we see young families pointing as Superman flies away, still deep in thought as he considers, like the fact that some people can only believe in the reality of what they see and touch, while to others, imagination is so real that it may as well be truth. And he smiles to himself, and a small caption reads,
The end.
Well, listeners, why did we decide to do that one then?
Well, it plays with the reality of the Earth 1 continuity. It's basically someone who created Superman. Literally. It's very much like the Carrie Bates story we did.
Yes.
Where Carrie, real life Earth Prime Carrie, wills himself into being on Earth 1 and finds that he can manipulate events on Earth 1
Yes.
by his plotting power. But this is a character who exists in the story who can do pretty much the same thing, but it's unaware of the fact that he's doing it. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating, and it riffs on that whole thing of people in one continuum being tuned into events in another continuum and turning them into stories or whatever. It's interesting how, from page 9 and all that, as Supes kind of does what Joey tells him to.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
That's really, really interesting. you know, the fact that Joey is sort of, as you said, imagined a Superman in the first place, but
Mhm.
it's almost unreal. It's like, what's actually happening? Is Supes doing this, or is he doing it because Joey's imagining him doing it?
Yeah.
Is Joey anticipating what's going to happen and relaying it as it happens, or is it simultaneously, or is it all kind of dependent on each other? It's quite nice that it's not really completely spelled out.
Yeah, I mean, if Joey was just like trying to manipulate events, he would just say, and the bomb malfunctioned. And that's all he had to do, and that would be the end of it. But obviously, he can't do that because that's not how it's going to play out. He has to try and figure out the actual way that Superman can solve this problem so that Superman can basically copy what he's been told to do.
Yes.
It can't be something as straightforward as the bomb malfunctions because that's not something that can happen. It's really weird, but it makes sense within the logic of the story.
Agreed. Most definitely.
Mm.
Beautiful art from Kurt Swan, eh?
Yes, absolutely. I do love how Joey's portrayed almost like Santa. He's with especially when he's sitting down with all the kids around him at the end, and also his whole communing with nature. I mean, you've got like I think there's a cheetah that goes up to him and he's like stroking the head of a cheetah as he's telling the stories. It's wonderful. It's very Dr. Dolittle-y.
Yeah, that adds to the whole unreality of it as well. I mean, and also just the coincidence that as he's telling a story about the roadside drama that Supes happens to actually fly in.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's all a bit chicken and eggs, the wrong way to put it.
Yeah.
But it's all quite, what is actually going on? Is Joey going to continue to have an influence, or is he having an influence, or is it just coincidence, or?
Well, as far as I'm aware, Joey doesn't return, but I think it's a lost opportunity because that is someone that, I mean, imagine like a supervillain finds out he can do this and tries to manipulate him into changing reality.
Yeah.
That would be really, really interesting. I want to know about this Viking town in Maine that he mentions at the end. I wonder what that's all about.
Absolutely. I want you and me to go back in time 40 years and point this story out to Marv Wolfman so that Joey Jerome gets included in the crisis and is responsible for stopping the Anti-Monitor.
Maybe Joey Jerome is the Monitor.
Maybe he is.
Oh, there we are.
There you go, listeners. Headcanon incoming. It is such a fascinating idea, and as you say, it does tie in closely with the Carrie Bates trip to Central City, which we covered a couple of months ago, and also it kind of anticipates in a way events in the next JLA JSA crossover,
especially given this is written by Elliot S. Maggin.
Exactly, which we'll get to in a few months.
But the ultimate question really is: does Joey have superpowers, or is he just really perceptive?
Well, Clark's got that panel where he sort of explains it about his psychologist friend about being tuned into events. It's almost maybe it's a precognition sort of power or sense that Joey's got. When Clark flies back to deal with the bomb, it's almost like Clark has no idea what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Because he asks Joey to, can you narrate what you think is going to happen and I'll listen.
Yep.
And it does seem that Clark then goes on to do what Joey suggests. That strikes me as just being bizarre.
Yeah. Or is he thinking of it at the same time that Joey's actually saying the words? Is he thinking the same ideas as Joey is saying it and not necessarily reacting to what Joey is saying?
I don't know, because I mean, he does say, tell the ending in a clear, strong voice and I'll listen. Is Clark inspired by what Joey's saying? Because he does sort of think, you spin these little P-bombs like a dervish to get them out of the way, and Clark thinks, yes, if I can separate the big bomb into a bunch. So it seems that they're almost working in tandem.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting. It's a deep one, and I wish I wish I was a little bit more awake.
we should talk about the solution in the end, because obviously bringing the bomb forward in time, like in increments, to have it explode a bit, explode a bit. That's, you were absolutely right making the Captain Atom analogy, because that's literally the Carrie Bates written 80s Captain Atom origin.
So it is. Much. Yeah. That's hilarious. I wonder if Elliot noticed that Carrie was written him off.
But that's a great way to disperse the energy without it all going off in one go. And you think it'd actually do it over a bigger period, but obviously we don't know how long he was actually doing this for. It's not really stated in the story. He could have been doing it for hours for all we know. It's a really interesting and different way to tackle this situation. And it's something we haven't really seen before.
No, the whole thing that does seem really out there, and it actually does give it a real bit of tension.
Yeah.
Like, we did those Lois Lane stories recently, and we sort of remarked at how they felt a bit more grown up than the usual Lois Lane, and that felt a little bit more grown up and a little bit more genuinely sort of like there's a real sense of threat there.
Yeah.
Than in most sort of like the scale of the threat. Like the whole world could be destroyed, but it felt realistic because there is this solar bomb, there is this technology, there is genuine concern about it in other areas. I mean, this could have been a plot for a Christopher Reeve Superman movie in a way.
Yeah.
I can almost imagine. And I like the way that Superman himself is he's obviously hurt in the process, because a solar bomb, that's bound to have some kind of impact on his powers in some way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
is it going to take or give away the fact that he needs rescued by the Navy? I think the impact on them all and on everything, the scale of the threat, it was really well sort of realised that way.
Yeah. And also, it's kind of a reference as well to like the Manhattan Project, because remember there was that theory that the explosion of the atomic bomb would set the atmosphere on fire.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, we'll just test it anyway.
Oh, I know. I remember that bit in Oppenheimer just being like, me and Danny just looking at each other going, oh, it's a good thing, isn't it?
But that was something that actually happened. So it's a reference to that as well, I'm sure. So it's fascinating. But again, this is quite 70s pop culture because you had a lot of protests about nuclear weapons and stuff like that.
Ban the bomb.
Yeah, the pop psychology as well of my psychologist friend, blah, blah, blah. It's very much kind of 70s zeitgeist psychology because no one would say anything like that these days.
No, I agree.
That's very much, but you could totally imagine it being said in the 70s.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is very, again, of its time, but still entertaining.
And of its time, we should quickly comment on the office politics scene.
Yes.
That was very amusing, wasn't it?
I do enjoy Steve Lombard getting his comeuppance. Constant bully Steve Lombard is comedy gold, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
It's not great Steve Lombard in this. And he doesn't do big classic setups. It's more just like opportunist bump. Let's have a bit of fun, and they'll try and cop off with the, with the assistants.
Yeah, it's nice to see him because he was that sort of recurring sort of almost nemesis for Clark.
Yeah,
in a way. And he's been used a lot over the years in different ways. So it's nice that he's finally popped up.
And it's a classic jock and nerd situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
With Steve and Clark. But
and of course, the dramatic irony is that we know that Clark is big and buff and strong and Steve doesn't. So that's a question. Does Steve Lombard ever find out that Clark is Superman? Someone can let me know. Or else we'll Google it during our lunch break. Yes, we have lunch breaks on this podcast. Do you have lunch breaks when you listen to the podcast or when you record your podcast? Write in and let us know. Peter will tell you how to do that shortly.
It's funny that Steve was commenting on soccer. That was quite amusing to me. It's like, good job, fellas. I like that soccer story, Steve. It's like, nobody likes a soccer story in the States.
Yes.
Sorry, but, and it's called football.
It is called football.
Unlike Hand Egg, Armoured Hand Egg, which is what the Americans play.
Armoured Hand Egg?
Yeah.
Didn't they support the Montrose Avenue? Hang on, as I look round to the poster. At the Sheffield Leadmill in 19... Blah, blah, blah.
Because American football is not football. It's definitely hand
I know, it's
egg.
that weird rugby thing, isn't it? But they wear helmets.
I know.
Anyway.
That country.
I know. Shakes fist. Sort yourselves out. Anyway.
Let's just dive on to the letters pages for this and see what the readers at the time thought.
Yes, so skipping ahead, listeners, to Action Comics issue 451, I will quickly point out there's a really excellent full-page advertisement for the Man-Bat ongoing series, which along the bottom has a little caption that reads, and watch for 3 more from Conway's Corner, because Man-Bat was written by Jerry Conway, and it mentions All-Star Comics, Black Hawk, and Codename Assassin. So just let that linger in your brains. Going forward, we're not going to say anything else about that now, but Superman in Action, care of National Periodical Publications, Inc., 75 Rockefeller Plaza, New York, NY 119, and the first letter goes like this.
Dear Mr. Schwartz, the man who created Superman, Action 447, is exactly the kind of story Elliot S. Maggin handles so well. The menace is tertiary to the hero, who is himself secondary to a human interest or other interest plot element. Elliot made me care much more about Uncle Joe than I cared about the solar bomb. And while I think the moral in Superman's thoughts at the end of the tale was equally clear unsaid, to complain about it would be nitpicking of the 6 fingers on page 12, panel 7 school of letter of comments. So I will only compliment Messrs. Maggin, Swan and Oxner for a very good outing. He then goes on to talk about the Atom backup story and finishes by saying, well, that's it for this month, friends. A straightforward letter of comment for a straightforward comic by Roger Clarice, Brooklyn, New York.
Ian B's response is, glad to hear that. We wouldn't want our magazine to be backward.
Mm-hmm.
A straightforward comic, I see you did there. Yeah, I'd love a collection of all these Green Arrow and Atom backup strips from Action Comics. That'd be quite good if you're listening to DC Comics. Sort it out.
And then carry on to the Airwave and the...
Absolutely.
And the Aquaman.
And the other Atom stuff, and then the ones when they all teamed up. Yeah, but I'd buy it. Anyway.
I'd buy 2.
Just want to point out that the first panel of the Green Arrow backup strip has someone singing a song that reads, my name is Davey, singing songs and I've seen many things. So I might have to crop that and use it for my wallpaper on my socials. But anyway, the second letter goes like this. Dear ENB, Elliot Maggin turned out a fine tale in The Man Who Created Superman. The action was well executed and plotted and kept me interested right up until the second to last page. Then it kind of deflated. The problem was Mr. Maggin's weak explanation of how Jerome knew everything that was happening, and that explanation was very weak. His subconscious remembered the reports of a super baby, and boom! Jerome knew he was called Superman, what city he lived in, what type of hero he was, and followed all the events that led to his rescue. And how did Jerome know Supes could break the time barrier? Come on, Elliot. I love your stories, but try to restrain yourself. He continues, the Atom tale was better than most. I think Marty Pascoe is getting better every tale he writes. The art was superb also. All in all, Action 447 was pretty good, and that's from Perry Wilson, Sonora, California.
Shake, 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 Sonora, shake it all the time.
We'll be playing out that song in the next episode of The Power of Three.
And editorial response says, if you didn't like Clark's explanation of Joey's knowledge, try Brad's answer on page 6. He'd always had a second sight, knew things that no one else knew.
Yeah, I think as we said, he definitely had some kind of precognitive power.
Yeah, although he didn't seem to know that Clark was Superman.
This is very true.
Which is an interesting omission of this power.
That is very true. Interesting. Should have thought of that, Elliot S. Maggin. Anyway.
Indeed. The final letter says, Dear Editor, it's been a long time since Superman did anything really super. Helping Green Lantern polish off Sinestro, thwarting the Revenge Squad, and playing cat and mouse with suspicious Lois Lane are just cans of corn for the Man of Steel. But saving the world from a solar bomb blast, in a most ingenious manner, is a job for Superman. Uncle Joey is a fine, lovable character, and a heck of a smart man. The Metropolis Marvel needed help with this one, and he got it from an old, eccentric hermit. A hermit who has an imagination, a built-in coming attractions for reality. It would be interesting to see Uncle Joey again, but only when the action ace is totally stumped.
That's actually a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some desperate universe-shattering,
Indeed.
Problem.
Crisis of some sort.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You saw what I did there.
Yes. He then goes on to talk about the Atom story, and that's from Joe Paluzzo, Brooklyn, New York.
Editor response goes, thanks, and here's a welcome back to long-time letter call regular Paluzzo. We don't get as many letters from you as we used to, but when we do, we like them. And that's from E. Nelson Bridwell. Terrific. A very thought-provoking story, I think. It's fair to say. Mm-hmm. I think we're justified in doing this.
Yeah, certainly worth covering.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but especially the cover image especially makes you sort of... It plays with the reality of the whole situation of everything that we're covering, and I think, I think it was worth doing.
And of course, Joe and Jerome are named after Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel, which no one's mentioned in the letter column.
Oh.
But I would imagine that was the case.
Oh.
Could be wrong, but I would find it most likely to be the case. And I've only just thought of that.
And it struck me dumb, listeners. Food for thought. That adds to it even more. That adds a whole other level.
Yes.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Gosh. Yeah, we hadn't. Yeah, definitely. Right. Before Peter has any other ideas. What could the listeners do if they wanted to tell us what they thought of the story?
Well, you can write to us at the earth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media because we put up lots of lovely bonus content for this and indeed every episode. On Facebook and Instagram, we're at the Earth 2 Podcast, and at Twitter, because we're still calling it that.
We are.
But we are at podcast_Earth2, and it is the number 2 for all of our socials.
It really is. If you're feeling generous, listeners, you could go to wherever it is you receive your podcasts and share the love by giving us a positive review. That would be nice. Or you could go to our coffee page and buy Peter the price of a beverage. Overload him with the cost of beverage, and maybe he'll buy me a bottle of Ribena with some of the excess. That would be lovely. Check out the socials this week. I've got a few foreign reprints of Action Comics 447 to throw up. Almost the justification for doing it. Not much else, actually, to be honest. So we'll have a scrounge around and see if I can find a couple of Steve Lombard covers. Interesting. I've set myself a challenge there. Will I even bother? Who can say, well, Peter, leave this bit in? Who can say there's only one way to find out, and that's to listen to this episode that you've already listened to.
Indeed.
And then keep checking out the socials or something or nothing.
I want DC to release the greatest Steve Lombard stories ever told collection.
When did Steve Lombard first appear? He must be due an anniversary hardback at some point. Well, that's a great idea. I would buy it. I'm sure Ross would buy it as well. So that's at least 3 sales. Maybe Kirby would buy it too. I don't know. Anyway.
Speaking of Steves.
Speaking of Steve, yes. Steve Higgins will be back with me next week as we do the final 2 stories of the Spectre from the pages of Adventure Comics. And the following week there'll be a lot more besides, so stay tuned for that. Peter now gets a couple of weeks off as he goes to sit with his feet up and just do some relaxing editing and not do any talking.
Relaxing editing? You don't know my pain, sir. On that bombshell, I've been Peter.
And I've been laughing at the hard work that we've both given ourselves for the last 5 years or something or nothing. Right, we'll see you soon, folks. Take care. See you again on
The
Earth
Earth
2
2
podcast.
podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Lanny starts to remind me, for the benefit of YouTube viewers, annoying Peter because I'm brushing my shirt and hitting my microphone. It plays at that whole, the reality of, sorry,